Which screen are you guys seeing? Are you seeing the full screen or are you seeing the presenter one with the notes on the side?
Full screen.
Full screen.
That's perfect. Perfect. Welcome all who are joining us. Thank you so much.
Bienvenidos a todos que
Great
están
patience.
viniendo.
We are going to get started here in a second. I'm just allowing folks to trickle in. The first order of business. Hi again, my name is Dave Java with Plan to Place, part of the consultant team. The first thing we'd like to do is, Eric, I think that switched over to your other screen. Thank you for your patience. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to have our Spanish interpreter read the next slide here, and then we're going to open our Spanish speaking room.
La interpretación en simultáneo para esta reunión se dará en los siguientes lenguajes. En español, bajo la opción de español. Por favor, haz clic en el icono interpretación en su barra que queda por debajo de su pantalla. So, si quiere tener interpretación en lenguaje español, por favor, haz clic en el globo y escoja, por favor, el español como lenguaje. Y luego todo se va a interpretar al español.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. So with that, the Spanish speaking room is now open. And we'll go on to the next slide. Excellent. So this is the agenda for tonight's meeting. As you can see here, we had a little moment here to settle in, which is perfect timing. We're going to move on to just give you a brief overview of the framework for tonight. It's sustainability. We have some experts here in the room. They're going to provide you an overview of some of the key findings related to that topic and how that will fold into the overall general plan process. We're going to have some live polling that we're going to also do throughout the process so that we can kind of get some feedback from you all directly that way as well. Most importantly, we're going to move into small groups, and in the small groups, we're going to be able to have a deeper discussion with you all and to kind of dive deeper into some of the bigger topics, and then come back and do a report out in next steps so that you all can hear back from each other, and then close up right around 7:30. Move on to the next slide. So again, as I've mentioned before, these community conversations are really meant to provide an overview of where we are in the process, giving you some feedback on kind of where we've been and where we're headed, get a little feedback from what we've heard from the community and how that's actually worked into the key goals and policies and measures that will continue to lead to what will be the general plan element related to this specific topic. So we'll get into that here shortly. Next slide, please. And then the way that we're hoping to engage with you all throughout this process, as I'm sure you can see, the chat window is open. And we definitely encourage you to let us know if you have any questions or comments as we navigate through the presentation itself. And then we'll have, again, an opportunity to have more of a conversation with you all during the small group exercise, as well as the surveys that we'll be asking of you all as we move through the meeting. But we want to just inform you that chat window is open for you to be able to kind of throw questions at us that then we could dive into deeper as we get into the small groups. So, and most importantly, there will also be surveys available after this workshop for those that obviously didn't have a chance to attend and those that did, to go there and take additional surveys related to this topic and all the topics we'll be talking about throughout this series of meetings. And that will also give you more information about the summary from this meeting and upcoming meetings, and that's all at www.shapessf.com. So definitely stay tuned there as well. And with that, we are going to do our first Multimeter poll. So as you can see here on the screen, and I hope this is easy for you all, if you go to www.menti, that's MENTI.com, and you could do that on your computers. You could pull that up more simply on your phone. And once you get there, if you dial in this code, 777-45398, that will give you access to the Mentimeter survey polling system, which we'll be using a few times throughout this presentation. And we will be asking questions through that starting here, I believe, on the next slide.
Yep, that's right. Hi, my name is Megan McNulty. I'm a planner with Ramey and Associates. I'm working on this general plan update. Before we get into some of the presentation about sustainability, I'm going to share with you a few demographic questions. Let me just pull up my window here. And again, this is using Mentimeter. First one is just sort of a fun icebreaker question. So we've all been using Zoom a lot lately. Are you wearing your pajamas right now? So yes, no, a couple people aren't telling, a little secretive. So this one's just in here again. This is not weighing into the general plan in any way, but it's just to get you comfortable with Mentimeter. So I'll give it a couple more seconds and then we'll ask a few demographic questions. All right, let me move on to the first demographic question then. All right, the first one is, how old are you? And we're asking these questions up front just because we want to get a sense of who is coming to the meetings, age, demographics, race, ethnicity, what neighborhoods people are from, just to get a sense of who we're reaching and to target future engagement. All right, so a couple people between ages 31 and 64. I'll wait a couple more seconds here. Participants. Okay, thank you. Next one, race, ethnicity. Great, 7 there. Looks like we have 7 people participating in these polls. And then the neighborhood you live in. If you don't live in SSF, you can choose the last option. Okay. We wait for the 2 other people who are participating in the polling. Right now we have 5. There we go. Great. Oh, there's another person. Okay. Thank you. All right, now where do you work? And if you don't live in, or if you don't work in South San Francisco, you select the last option. Okay. Ooh, nobody works in SSF so far. Somebody in East of 101. All right. I think this is the last question in this part. Have you attended a Shape SSF event? So this could be a workshop, pop-up event, any of these Zoom meetings that we've had over the past several months during COVID. So most people have, it's great. A few people haven't, so there we are. Okay, so thank you. We'll have a few more questions throughout the presentation, but I'll turn it back to Eric. And Dave.
Thank you so much, Megan. That was super fun. As you all can see, that's much more interactive and exciting than your typical Zoom live polls, which I'm sure you all have been getting used to throughout this past year. And those polls are continually available. So if you're going back on your cell phone, that's still there. If you didn't get a chance to take it, you still can, and we'll gather all that information and include it in the summary moving forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Thanks, Dave. My name is Eric Yerkovich. I'm principal at Ramey and Associates, and we've got a great group of people who are going to be weaving in and out and presenting to you, as Dave said, tonight. My job is actually very simple tonight. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the general plan update, what it will address, and some of the community engagement that we've done to date before I hand it over to Sammy Taylor to talk a little bit about the sustainability policy framework. As many of you know, the general plan is a long-range planning policy tool for the city. It really Every city in California and every county in California is required by state law to have and to regularly maintain their general plan. And general plans really afford an opportunity to set a long-term vision for 20 years into the future that really builds on your community strengths and then tackles new and emerging challenges within communities. And sustainability and climate change is one of those new kind of challenges that a lot of cities are starting to take on as part of their general plan updates. And the general plan itself will guide both policy development as well as future development projects within the city. So this graphic shows the simplified process for the general plan update to date. We kicked off the process with a discovery phase where we did a lot of existing conditions work, where we read all the policy documents in the city, pulled a bunch of technical information together, and then republished out some of the key findings from that work. Simultaneously, we conducted a listening session around the city where we really asked people what they loved about South San Francisco, what they would like to see in the future of the city. And we did that to really help create a vision statement and a series of core values and guiding principles, which I'll talk about shortly. From there, we really launched into this process to develop land use and mobility alternatives for the general plan update. We culminated that process last fall with the selection of the preferred land use map and the preferred alternative for the general plan update. And now we're really launching into this phase where we're starting to develop the policy that's part of the general plan itself. And so we're doing that across many elements of the general plan, and which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. During this process, we've completed a significant amount of community engagement. And this is just a sort of a brief snapshot of some of the types of activities we've done throughout the process. These include in-person activities, such as community visioning festivals, sub-area meetings that were done pre-COVID-19 pandemic. And it also includes a number of activities that we've done and conducted since the pandemic began, including the virtual alternatives workshops, as well as online surveys and more. And we heard a lot of different things during that engagement process, a lot of really great ideas. And it helped us to understand both some of the key issues that people were facing in the city that we're using to really kind of pivot into thinking about what is the right policy that needs to be incorporated into the general plan update. And this graphic starts to illustrate a few of those policy and programmatic ideas that came up as part of the land use alternatives process. And these have really been directly integrated into these different policy frameworks that we're going to be talking with the community about over the next 3 weeks. And now, as Dave said, these community conversations are really an interim step for us in the general plan update process. We'll be hosting, I think, 10 of these different meetings where we'll be presenting these draft policy frameworks. Now, they're generally, a policy framework is really for a full chapter of the general plan where we take on sustainability, safety and climate change, land use, mobility, and so forth. And these are really an interim step. I would call them sort of a 50 to 75% draft of a general plan element. They're most of the big ideas that we've heard throughout the process that we want to get them documented, and we want to do it early so we can get your feedback on those ideas. What's there that you like? What's missing? What are the things that we need to prioritize as part of this general plan update? Now, I do want to make sure that everyone knows that these are kind of an interim step. They're not supposed to be comprehensive like the full element of the general plan will be. But so if you don't see something that you think is really important, just let us know. And we'll start to work it into the general plan itself. As I mentioned earlier, one of the initial steps of the general plan was really to hear from you all about what the vision and guiding principles were for the general plan update. And so as you start to think about the policy framework today, consider whether or not it fits in with this framework for vision and guiding principles for the plan itself. The community vision, it really provides that umbrella for the general plan. It articulates where South San Francisco wants to be in 2040. So South San Francisco is a place where everyone can thrive. It's high quality of life, diverse and inclusive community, livable neighborhoods, and excellent services, culture of innovation, and environmental leadership ensure all people have an equitable opportunity to reach their full potential. And as we get into the policy framework for sustainability today, you'll see some of those direct ties back to things about environmental leadership, innovation, and equitable opportunities. Throughout the general plan process, we heard a lot of community members articulate a series of kind of shared values or shared beliefs. And so these include innovation, sustainability, equity and inclusion, and livability. And while the vision statement tells us where we want to be in 2040, and the goals, actions, and policies talk about what we are going to do in the general plan, I think what these community values really do is articulate how we will implement those different policies and actions in the general plan. And then finally on the screen, you see there are these 5 kind of guiding principles that we're going to be seeking to kind of advance through this general plan update. So these relate to affordable and safe neighborhoods, attractive and high quality amenities and services, a safe, convenient transportation network, a resilient community, and a vibrant, prosperous economy in downtown. Now, again, I think as we start to talk about that sustainability framework for the general plan update, you can start to think about these direct ties back into the vision, those core values, and a resilient community here as these guiding principles. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Sammy Taylor, to walk us through the policy framework for sustainability.
Okay, can everyone hear me and possibly see me? I've had some technical difficulties this evening, so I'm on my phone, which is a bit strange, but we'll work through it. That's what we do. Okay, so thanks, Eric. My name is Sammy Taylor. I'm a sustainability planner with Ramey & Associates, and I've been working on the sustainability framework for South San Francisco, as well as starting working on the climate action plan update. So to kick us off, next slide, please. We're just going to go over some background and some key terms and concepts. So what is sustainability? Sustainability is the ability to meet the needs of the present without preventing future generations from meeting their needs in the future. This is a Brundtland Commission definition, and it really captures the intent and spirit of what sustainability is. So you can see here that there are these 3 kind of pillars: planet, prosperity, people, or equity, environment, and economy. And the true sustainability is really at the intersection of these 3 topics. All affect each other and all kind of work to create this sustainable lifestyle. So it's important to really, practice sustainability, and it's becoming even more important as we deal with the potential impacts of climate change, which we're already experiencing in South San Francisco and throughout the world. And climate change is really only one aspect of environmental sustainability, but affects the other components as well, which you'll see. Next slide, please. So what are greenhouse gases? Greenhouse gases are gases that absorb energy from the sun and trap heat and energy within the Earth's atmosphere, causing a warming effect. Here's kind of a list of some of the most common ones: water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, ozone, nitrous oxide. Those are some of the big ones that you probably hear about regularly. And so some of them are naturally occurring, but they're also human caused as well. So climate change is caused by the increase of these greenhouse gas emissions that trap this heat in the atmosphere and cause the temperature to warm, and also create disruptions of historic or normal climate patterns. Next slide. So when we have these changes in greenhouse gases, as you can see in this graph here, we can see that there's been a large increase in GHG levels in the atmosphere kind of since the Industrial Revolution, when we started kind of combusting fossil fuels and undergoing major land use changes, including deforestation, fossil fuel powered transportation, and practicing agriculture in a really unsustainable way. And this atmospheric warming has led to other changes in our Earth systems, including changing patterns of rainfall and snow, which we've experienced here in California as major times of drought, prolonged drought, and also periods of heavy rain that lead to other issues. The melting of glaciers and ice, which can lead to sea level rise and is leading to sea level rise, and the warming of our ocean and changing ocean chemistry. Next slide. Okay, so we've done some outreach already about this topic to the community in South San Francisco, and throughout the general plan process, it's come up as something the community wants to learn more about and also see South San Francisco excel in this area. So we've learned that, you know, climate change is happening in California and South San Francisco already, and we're already experiencing those effects both gradually with sea level rise, and also with more climate hazards, which include extreme heat days, which can expose people and infrastructure and buildings and properties and ecosystems to a wide range of stress-inducing hazardous situations. So these hazards and their impact disproportionately affect the most sensitive populations in the city. In the light of this, the state has been taking climate action since 2006 with their landmark legislation, AB 32. And then it passed SB 32, which adopted the state's emissions target, current emissions reduction target of 40% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050, in order to help prevent kind of the worst of these climate impacts that we're already seeing and keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So some of the climate impacts in South San Francisco are sea level rise, excessive heat days, poor air quality, and periods of drought and flood. And you can see that these issues are all kind of interrelated and build upon each other. So addressing them becomes really important. Okay, next slide, please. So in order to figure out where South San Francisco is, we conduct a greenhouse gas inventory. So this is the 2017 greenhouse gas emissions profile for the city. And it kind of shows how emissions change and that they're following the same trends as the first greenhouse gas inventory, which was conducted in 2005. You can see this orange slice here. Transportation is the largest sector, which accounts for 44% of the city's emissions, followed by energy use, which is non-residential and residential combined, 41% of total emissions. So that dark blue and aquamarine colored slices there. So the 2017 estimates a baseline emissions rate per service population, so people who live and or work in the city, of 4.5 metric tons of CO2 equivalent annually. And tracking GHG emissions allows the city to set a baseline and identify potential reductions needed to align with the statewide greenhouse gas reduction targets. Next slide, please. So in addition to conducting an inventory, which is based on real activity data and real numbers, we also do projections. So we've projected out here to 2040, which is the horizon year of the general plan. And this was based on the preferred general plan land use alternatives to estimate those emissions for that build out. So you can see that the city is projected to grow pretty quickly, but emissions are only expected to increase about 2% from 2017 levels. And this is the result of state climate action policies that impact local emissions. But you could also see that in order to reach those reduction targets, we'll need local climate action measures as well. So next slide, please. So based on some of the outreach that we've done so far, we've heard the main themes kind of come up across the city. And number one is that it should be an environmental leader. And that means really not only focusing on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, but focusing on kind of all of those aspects of sustainability that I mentioned before. And the city should have, you know, access to public transit, improve safety for active transportation, so safer conditions for walking and biking, improves parks and open spaces, which improves ecosystems, and a connection to nature and preserving the cultural resources, as well as addressing the climate threats that we know are coming. So establishing the leader or the city as leader was really a priority for the community, and taking that leadership role in creating a cleaner, healthier, and more economically viable future through conscious investments and regulatory measures to target greenhouse gas emissions is something that the community would really like to see. And you can see on this slide here that there's kind of a list of things that we've heard people talk about as we've done this outreach so far. And it really has to do with like bringing back nature to South San Francisco and making that connection for the people that live and work there. Next slide, please. So where should we go in the future? What will that look like? And that's how we kind of use these policy frameworks to get where we're going. I'm not sure if I'm passing this off or I'm doing these ones. Okay, I can only see one person on my screen, so I'm going to keep going. So the structure of these policy frameworks kind of are based on what we want to see in the future, these outcomes. So it's a statement describing where we want to be in 2040. And then from that, we can establish both targets and performance metrics to measure how we're doing, and also establish goals and policies and measures to help us achieve those goals. The goals are really an expression of community values and direction, and then the policies and measures are specific statements and actions that either guide decision-making or carry out a policy. Next slide, please. So these policy frameworks are an interim step. They're not really an exhaustive list of all the total policies that will be included in the element chapter, but it's rather a way to see where we're going, see what the general direction of these policies are, and then to get your reaction and feedback on them. So additional measures will be included in the general plan. And then as I mentioned before, the city is also working on a climate action plan. So additional sustainability measures will be included in that as well that are more specifically tailored to greenhouse gas reductions as a whole. The next slide, please. So the sustainability policy framework is made up of these 5 different topics, and it focuses on these environmental topic areas. So each of them will be integrated into the appropriate general plan element. For example, stormwater and biodiversity are included in the conservation element. Low carbon mobility measures such as walking, biking, and transit are integrated into the mobility element. And the creation of low carbon communities that encourage walking and biking are included in the land use element. So climate adaptation is also addressed in the safety element. So you can see that this is kind of a really wide ranging topic that has a lot of fingers in all the different elements of the plan, but also in all the different elements of livability in South San Francisco. Next slide, please. So the sustainability outcomes that we've identified through outreach and conversations with the city are listed here on your screen. So the first is that South San Francisco becomes an environmental leader in the region by acting decisively and inspiring other communities to also eliminate their greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change. That the city continues to reduce energy and water use and minimize the amount of waste sent to landfills, and that going beyond the state targets, the city achieves carbon neutrality by 2045. Next slide, please. And now we're gonna have another Menti polling opportunity for everyone.
Yes, so we have a couple polling questions related to these outcomes that Sammy just shared. We move to the next screen. All right, so first one, what is your level of knowledge on climate change and sustainability? So 3 people have said so far that they feel somewhat informed about both issues. A couple people have said that they feel very informed about both issues. It's great. Okay. More seconds. And as Dave said, you can always go back and take these polls if you miss them here. Oop, late results coming in. All right, so most people feel somewhat informed on both issues. And the next question, what is the most significant barrier to addressing climate change in SSF? So we have cost, lack of information or awareness, just not a priority. There are inequities that prevent certain populations from accessing solutions, or I don't know. And we are all across the board right now. Cost, information. Great. So there doesn't seem to be strong, people's priorities are all across the board. So that's interesting to bring into the discussions later. So I'm going to pause my share here. Eric can hop on, and then I'll give it back to Sammy.
Thank you for that, Megan, and thank you for the great presentation, Sammy. We are now going to be moving into the small group discussion. Oh, we're not. We have a couple more slides. My fault. Sorry. Are you bringing that back up? Oh, I might have skipped the whole section here. I was moving us along a little too quickly. So we're going to get right back into the presentation here before we transition to small groups.
And then Dave, can you unmute as host? Can you unmute Sammy, please?
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Okay, great. Okay, thanks everyone. Those are really interesting results from the Menti poll, so I'm excited to get into that discussion later. But we just have a couple more slides, then we can head into that. So like we mentioned, these policy frameworks include some performance indicators. And so what we've chosen for sustainability is to track greenhouse gas emissions with the target of reducing 40% by 2030 and then becoming carbon neutral by 2045. Energy use with the target of reducing energy use by 20%. Water use, we'll establish a water use target once the state has established their new water use target, so we can be in line with state policy. And then also becoming a zero waste city by 2045, so reducing our solid waste that we send to landfills. So next slide, please. So now we'll get into some of the policies that we talk about in the policy framework by each of these topics. So the outcome for green buildings is to make green buildings a standard in South San Francisco for new construction and major renovations. So this includes adopting an ordinance or series of ordinances that improve the performance of new construction and major remodels through an all-electric reach code, requiring retrofits of water fixtures to high efficiency appliances, installing solar on new construction, things like that. We'll also establish a baseline approval process for battery storage systems so that you can streamline that process and make it easier to install batteries to provide resilience for homes, businesses, resiliency hubs, kind of wherever that may be. And also establishing a streamlined process for gray water systems, such as laundry to landscape, where you reuse your laundry water to water your plants outside. Next slide, please. So one of the emerging practices in this area of new construction is banning natural gas, or kind of less extreme, encouraging all electric new construction. So in Berkeley, the city actually banned new natural gas hookups in new construction and cited it as a public health hazard. So they didn't even use the building code as their vehicle to achieve all electric new construction. They cited it as a natural gas as a public health hazard, which it can be, as you've seen kind of on the peninsula where you guys are. So some of the benefits of doing this are that homes are more affordable to construct when they are all electric, and it also improves indoor air quality and health since you're not combusting any fossil fuels within your home. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'll also add that several, I would say almost 50 jurisdictions in California have already adopted some version of an all-electric reach code, and there are another, 50 that are considering following suit as well. Okay, so then the flip side of the same coin would be existing buildings. So the next outcome is improving existing buildings in South San Francisco. So establishing an energy and water efficiency upgrade program for existing buildings is one way to achieve this, and really focusing resources on the most underserved populations. Phasing out natural gas in existing buildings and seeking opportunities to install additional EV chargers in either public facilities so that people can access them, or providing incentives or other things to encourage the installation in existing parking structures, regional parks, and multi-unit dwellings. Next slide, please. So the emerging practice in this area is San Francisco's natural gas phase-out plan. So the goal of this plan is to achieve zero emissions in all of their buildings by 2050. And this is one of the hardest things to achieve, really, is to how do we deal with our existing buildings, which when we look at it are, the majority of where our emissions are coming from, related to buildings anyway. So how do we really address that when it's not as easy as starting new with an efficient code and also all electric new construction? So in San Francisco, between 2023 and 2028, they're requiring that this phase-in policy that all newly installed equipment has to be all electric, and that they're adopting a policy that requires large users and large buildings to submit a decarbonization plan to have their buildings become electric by 2035. And then they're helping to develop and adopt tenant protection and anti-displacement policies for renters in these buildings so that building owners and managers can't just pass through all costs or kick people out while they upgrade their buildings. So it's a really interesting way to kind of deal with this problem. They kind of did this update by a certain date approach, which is kind of what we're seeing in this sector, and is one of the since it's phased in, it seems like it's a more not only achievable, but since they're putting these protections in place, a more equitable way to achieve this decarbonization goal for their existing buildings. Next slide, please. So the third topic here is to create a resilient and fossil fuel-free energy system in the city. And so this is, not only dealing with clean energy, but also providing backup energy systems like microgrids, batteries, and other measures that serve the community during emergency events. So creating maybe resiliency hubs or something like that. Exploring the development of community solar projects, working with PG&E and San Mateo County to develop plans to create more EV charging infrastructure, maintaining the city's membership in Peninsula Clean Energy. So the city's already cleans up its energy supply, which is why one of the reasons that electrifying buildings is so important is that we can use these clean electrons to power our buildings without causing any more, GHG emissions than we would otherwise. So it's really important that the city has taken that step, and it's important that they continue to maintain that membership. So also partnering with PG&E to develop options for reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with natural gas, so fugitive emissions, things like that, and working to minimize the impact of the public safety power shutoff. Next slide, please. That's great. So an emerging practice in this area is microgrids. And so microgrids are kind of small, geographically based systems that are self-sufficient energy systems. They can integrate heating and cooling and contain energy storage. And also they usually have energy generation properties. So you can kind of see in this graphic here that there are batteries, solar panels, and it's kind of a discrete footprint. So you can see that the benefits are that it provides efficient, low-cost, clean energy. They can be isolated from the grid, so you have that sense of resiliency built in. Whereas if there is, the grid goes down, you can still have your microgrid. But also on the flip side, they can improve stability of the regional grid by participating in it when necessary. But they can reduce grid congestion. So it's a lot of balancing that goes on with microgrids, and something that cities are exploring to really achieve that resiliency and self-sufficiency for small areas of their city, like critical facilities and things like that. So next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to solid waste. One of the most important components of zero waste and solid waste is diverting organics from landfill, because like I mentioned, methane, which is one of the greenhouse gases, it's created by decomposing organic material, and it releases about 40% more CO2, or excuse me, 40% more greenhouse gases than CO2. So, excuse me. Policies in this area include creating a zero waste plan for municipal operations and the community, ensuring that recycling services are at all properties in the city, as well as curbside collection of residential organics and food waste, as well as from commercial facilities, and developing education programs to help serve those that are the largest generators of organics, and creating other diversion programs for them to reuse some of these materials, establishing a green purchasing policy for the city, and exploring opportunities to capture and reuse methane gas that's generated from the Oyster Point landfill. Next slide, please. So this topic is carbon sequestration, and it's a way to capture carbon and offset carbon emissions through natural systems. So implementing the city's urban forestry management plan is one way to do that. Planting trees and protecting open spaces is another. Expanding marsh and wetland habitat to sequester carbon also improves water quality and helps to provide a buffer for sea level rise, and also provides habitat for wildlife. And then finally, applying organic material, so compost or soil amendment from all the organics that the city is now picking up to available land areas to kind of offset those carbon emissions and store that carbon. So next slide, please. So the emerging practice in this area actually combines solid waste and carbon sequestration. And San Luis Obispo has what they're calling their circular economy, and it combines organics divergence from landfill as well as carbon sequestration in the city's open space. And so the city installed an anaerobic digester, which is this big machine you can see in the picture, and it collects organics from the city. It processes them in the anaerobic digester and then applies that soil amendment product, which is like compost, to its open spaces to sequester carbon and also improve ecosystem health of those areas. So it's a closed loop system, and I know the city is already exploring how it could do a version of this in a space that is more tailored to South San Francisco. So next slide, please. All right, and so the final topic covered by this policy framework is making the wastewater treatment plant operate as efficiently as possible through installing more efficient equipment and capturing and reusing the gas that's generated by the plant. And the city is also exploring using the plant to treat organic waste as well. So rather than maybe the anaerobic digester as a standalone unit, it can be included as part of the wastewater treatment plant. So next slide, please. So similar to this, Los Angeles has its Operation Next water supply program, and its goal is to recycle 100% of available treated water, wastewater, for beneficial reuse at one of their water treatment plants in LA. So the benefits is that it will provide purified recycled water and also build resiliency into the water storage and local groundwater systems by augmenting surface water supplies, providing water for local groundwater recharge and things like that. And it can potentially meet up to 1/3 of the city's water demand. Next slide.
All right,
I'll hand it back over to me.
Yeah, we have two more Mentimeter questions before we go into our small group discussions. So, and these are about the policies that Sammy just presented. The first one, how likely are you to do the actions below to help SSF? So these are some of the ideas that Sammy just presented: switching to electric equipment, replacing appliances, not accept or buy single-use plastics. And these are all scale questions, and there's a sliding bar, so you can select where on the scale, if you strongly agree or you strongly disagree. Seems like a lot of people are in favor of the first option there, switching to electric equipment. All right, thank you to those who participated. I'm going to move on to the next question since we want to go in our small groups, but you can come back later and fill out those polls. Next one, indicate which actions the city should prioritize for a sustainable SSF. Again, these are scale questions. You can indicate if you strongly disagree or strongly agree. So first option is about the building code, neighborhood resilience hubs, education and outreach. There we go, results all started coming in. Great. Seems like Number 4, accelerate implementation of the pedestrian bicycle master plan is the leading priority at this point. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second and turn it back over to Dave, but as I said, please feel free to continue filling out these polls, and thank you to those who participated.
Great, thanks so much, Megan. And again, great presentation, Sammy, thank you for that. So as I jumped ahead earlier and was trying to mention, we are now gonna move into small groups. And with that, what's gonna happen with these small groups is we're gonna just keep it a very open-ended conversation with you all. And Eric, sorry, I think you might be on, we could see 2 screens at once here. If it switches over. You know what, it's actually totally perfect, thank you. So we're gonna do just simple introductions, just to kind of get a sense of who's in the room, and then just walk you through a few simple discussion prompts, but really it's just an open-ended conversation, very informal. And then from that, we will come back together, as I mentioned earlier, and do a report out, just so folks can kind of hear what other folks talked about if you weren't in another group. And then we'll try to wrap up fairly efficiently here right around 7:30. With that, there's only about, I think we counted 16 to 17 members of the public with us. So we're gonna just break those into 2 groups. But before I do that, I wanted to get a raise of hands. Actually, Eric, do you want to go to the next slide? Just sorry, real quick. Just these are the type of questions, just so you can kind of start to get your head into it, the type of questions that we want to ask in those groups is, are there any other outcomes to consider that we haven't talked about? Of the policy ideas presented, which ones do you think the general plan should prioritize? And are there policy ideas that are not listed here that should be considered? So those are the type of questions that we're hoping to ask as we move into the small groups. So before we move into the small groups, I wanted to see if I can get either a physical or virtual raise of hands from members of the public that would like to be in the Spanish speaking only room. And they're hearing that right now through the interpreter, if there's folks in that room. Jasmine, if you could please ask if they could use the raise hand function that's at the bottom of the participant window and or at the bottom of their window, that would be great. I'll give it 1 second here to make sure we don't have any Spanish speakers, it looks like, that like to be in that room. Thank you, Diana, for the reminder. For those that have called in, you can also use this *9 on your phone to do the raise hand. Okay, it doesn't look like we have anyone. So with that, I already have the rooms set up. So I'm going to click a button here. You're going to be asked to move into one of those rooms. For members of the project team, you'll also be moved in the rooms and can move around freely from there. And we will go ahead and start the discussion. So have a great time. We'll see you back here shortly. Hi all, welcome back. Thank you so much for hanging with us. Sounds like a lot of great discussion going on in the small groups. I'm going to ask the team to bring up the slideshow, or you know what, let's go, we could just do it without the slideshow. We'll bring it up for the end. So what we typically like to do at this point is have the meeting facilitators go ahead and, oh, sorry, it looks like someone needs to be unmuted here. Give me 1 second. Sorry about this, Jasmine. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm going to ask the meeting facilitators to go ahead and give us a quick snapshot of the conversation they had. And then we'll have a couple next steps to let you know what's going to happen from here and meetings coming up and where all this information can be found moving forward. So with that, Eric, if you're ready, can you give a quick overview of the key themes that came out of your conversation?
Sure, thanks, Dave. I will do it very quickly. We had a really terrific conversation, and at the end of the conversation, we really started to focus on the idea that the climate action and sustainability measures need to be stratified by renter versus owner, by different parts of the city, by income level, and that there's not going to be a one size fits all for each of these different measures, that we need to be thinking about how they're most effectively implemented, and then where there might be opportunities for the city to plug in where there are gaps in that. So if a certain population doesn't have the resources to do sustainability measure X, maybe that's a spot where the city could kind of jump in and kind of facilitate that change over time. And I'll just say Mike Purcell, he committed to doing that. So you can talk to him about that later. And then we also talked about there's real strong support for the environmental leadership goal or outcome and carbon neutrality outcomes from our group. And then we also had a really nice and robust conversation about partnerships. And so how it wasn't just a property owner doing something, but how we can encourage partnerships amongst business owners, for example, to actually kind of come together to implement these sustainability measures.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Eric. And Sammy, your group, do you want to give us a quick synopsis of the conversation, and Paul can assist if needed?
Sure, thanks. So one of the things that we talked about, we kind of got there through the idea of diet and food sources, community gardens, and farmers markets, was the idea of adding a wellness component to the sustainability policy framework. So that kind of combines the ideas of quality of life, public health, and quality of life throughout the city. We also talked a lot about solar panels. There was a big focus on energy in our group. We talked about solar panels, and what we really boiled the conversation down to was providing education and outreach and resources and information to the community, not just about solar panels, but about other resources or incentives that may be out there to help people who are interested in installing solar panels or undertaking some of these sustainability related measures, teaching them and helping them to actually do that. So that's one of the big takeaways from our group. The other was exploring microgrids. So we had some fun kind of options around that, and just interesting in creating a more resilient and climate forward South San Francisco.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sammy. So with that, I'm going to ask either Eric or team to bring back up the presentation, just so we can quickly give you a synopsis of next steps and where we're going from here. Thank you, Eric. Maybe go on the next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, this was the first of many, many meetings to come. We're excited to have this series of meetings on all these different topics that we know are important to you all. Our next meeting is tomorrow at 11:30. And what we hope to do here is allow some times during the day and during this evening time to allow as much accessibility as possible, with the note though that if you aren't able to make it to any of these meetings, they're all recorded and they all will be posted to the project website with all the great notes that we're taking as well. So these will be resources for forever really, but throughout the future of this planning effort for you to all to go back to. But again, so next one is on safety and climate adaptation, coming up tomorrow at 11:30, followed by health, environmental justice, and equity coming up at 6 p.m. on the 17th. And then the last one this week will be on mobility on Thursday at 11:30. And then you'll see that we also have sub-area specific meetings that are coming up for East of 101, for downtown, and for Lindenville. And in between, we'll have conversations as well on parks and conservation, as well as housing. So a lot of great information to come. So thank you all for being part of this meeting today and for sharing the evening with us. If we go on to the next slide, Eric. And as I mentioned earlier as well, the surveys will be available on the project website that'll kind of feed off of the same information that you heard here tonight and allow you to add additional information onto different formats that are actually on the project website. Again, that's at shapessf.com, in this case /policy frameworks. And we ask that you respond by April 16th, so plenty of time. We're allowing for up to a couple weeks after the end of all of the series of meetings. So highly encourage you all to go there. You can leave input by topic that's interest to you, and you'll see other people's input that will populate as we move through the process as well. So that's yet another opportunity to provide additional input on these topics. And then finally, I believe, oh yeah, thank you, Eric. So this is actually to show you, so it's very much interactive. When you go onto the website, you'll see that you can actually leave individual comment bubbles on the individual framework itself. So all the great information that we shared with you today is provided in greater detail actually on the website for each one of these topics. As you can see here, it's a full actual framework for each one of these topics that allows you to go in and look at all the keywords, add information that you like, and other people could then come on top of that and add comments on top of your comments. You could up and down vote comments. It's very interactive that way. So even a greater level of detail than you were able to even provide the meeting here tonight. So highly encourage you all to do that and tell your friends so that we get as much input as possible. And it's a living and breathing document that way on the project website itself. So I hope you're able to visit that and share even more great comments with us. So with that, as always, we remind you all of the website again, shapessf.net or .com. They'll all take you there. And if you have any specific questions, Lisa Costa-Sanders from the project team is always available. And you have her email here, lisa.costasanders@ssf.net. And I believe that is it for tonight. Again, we very much appreciate your time. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us. We hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.